So I will call the meeting to order at, what is it, 7:33?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I believe our first order of business is the Burnt Hill appeal. Is there somebody here from Burnt Hill?
Yep, we have Tony and Robin Schaefer online.
Bunker Hill.
Okay. So, Tony or Robin, can you present your case?
Sure. So I thank you for hearing us. I do appreciate it. We do appreciate that. We were before you 2 years ago and put in an application so that we could sort of live out Robin's family's homestead at 999 Racebrook Road while we were building a new house on the property. And the intent at that point, because the house it's gotten to a point where it's not really at the moment suitable any longer for residents. So that's why we wanted to build a new house. And as time went on, we realized there was some significant, historical attachment to the structure itself. There's a lot of memorabilia from Robin's family, Robin's sixth generation that's been on this property. And there's still a lot of memorabilia in the structure itself. So we would like to amend the, what's in the historic?
Look, I don't know if you all, historic Woodbridge book, you all have copies of that? Does anybody have a copy of the book?
Anyway,
it's really a great book.
Anyway,
We'll refer to it if you need to, but the house is in the book. And
anyways, yes. So what we'd like to do is we're amending really our application from 2 years ago. So instead of tearing down the structure completely, we would like to retain to the front section of the structure as an ancillary outbuilding to sort of just retain the sort of the historical artifacts from Robin's family and just some sort of the sentimental value of the front section that was built by Robin's great-great-great-grandfather, I guess. Again, the house it's not suitable any longer to live in on an ongoing basis. We're going to take out the kitchen, take out the family room. Those areas were built actually in the 60s to accommodate Robin's parents as they were raising their kids, 6 kids, right? So the new section will be torn down, so it won't be able to be used as anything but really an ancillary outbuilding. And I believe that as of right, we're allowed, I think, 15% coverage of our property to be still used as total coverage for outbuildings and for the residents. We also actually there were 2 parcels that were deeded to Robin back when her parents passed away. We actually, this past month, were able to, we filed with the town clerk a map joining those 2 parcels together. So while originally the lot that we're on was only about 120,000 square feet, we've added the next lot over, which is 2 Pumpkin Patch. So that was about, I believe, 60,000 square feet. So now we have a total of about 181,000 square feet of acreage of land. So we're estimating that our total coverage would be around 9.6% of structure versus land. So again, that's under the 15% allotted for total coverage. So we think our application will allow us to again maintain this partial structure as of right, and we're just asking for the board to recognize that and to be able to amend the original application to allow the structure to partially remain. And I think I've submitted to you the sections that we're looking to remove and the section that would remain. So with that, entertain any questions.
Yes, I have a question. This is Cindy.
Hi, Cindy.
So hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
So what's your intention for use of the building once you do this?
Yeah.
Well, I think, there's definitely some storage. there's a nice, the room, which is an old part of the house. It's just a nice room. I think it would be nice. I think in my next career, I was hoping to do some writing, and just a quiet place to go to sit and relax and, basically have, significant storage. We do have some, family portraits, etc., that don't quite fit in this house, or they're not allowed to be in this house for my children. A lot of cross stitches and things, and it would be nice to have a place to put all those things in.
Again, I think to sort of as a for the heritage, for the Clark family heritage, more like I don't want to use the word museum because it's personal. Just as their own little. I don't want to use the right word shrine either, but
yeah, I mean it's sentimental value, but it's still a nice structure. The older part of the house, and again, it's in the historic book. Been in several generations. We decided that we would take advantage and build a house for the next 200 years on the property. I mean, it's beautiful. It used to be 147 acres, and now we call it the final 4 acres. There were several outbuildings over the years. Right now, there's just the barn, the red barn, but it just would be nice to keep this final building and, again, use it storage. Maybe it's like a sanctuary to go and, no TV or whatever, just sit, and there's a desk there. And I'm the one I don't want to be the one to break the chain. It's been in my family for, 200 years. And in the book, it says historically important for its continuous association with the Clark family for almost 175 years. So I'm the last one that lived there. Again, we thought about, we could have added onto it, but there's a lot of issues with the house, and we thought it's better for everybody for the future. Our kids, grandchildren, to build something new.
The other sort of advantage, I think I did write this down too, is there's the church. There was a church that was built across the street some years ago that was allowed to be built, and it really impinges on the sort of the feeling of Woodbridge, the feeling of quietness, and the house itself, where it's situated, really blocks the church from the rest of the property. So this is sort of another reason that we would like to keep that structure, partial structure in front, because it blocks basically the driveway to the church. When we were living there, it was, basically it was right on top of us, where, anytime there was any events going on, especially if they were at night, if we were, in bed, the lights would be constantly, shining in the windows, the horns, and the noise. In the wintertime with the snow, where instead of having a nice quiet evening with the snow, you hear the blades of the beeping of the snowplows backing up. So all that sort of gets, in a way, sheltered from us. And, it's
So we never wanted the Mormon church to be built, but it was my grandfather's land. And the time when my mother was alive, the Greek church wanted to build there. And, my grandfather said no. And then we passed away. In an unfortunate sequence of events, a neighbor bought the land without telling us that their intent was to sell to the Mormon church, because Mormons wanted to buy directly from my mother and sisters, and they said no. And so, again, a neighbor bought it, kept land that they wanted for their use, sold to the Mormon church. We tried to fight it, we couldn't. And then they said they wouldn't have a steeple. And then years later, they brought their lawyers from Fairfield, and they said, it's time, we need a steeple. Nobody knows there's a church. So we lost that battle as well. So here we are in the situation, hoping we can keep part of the building.
So, I mean, I think I have an observation. I mean, so, I'm looking at the bird's eye view maps here, which is helpful. So, I mean, the section that's going to be removed was the section that was added in the 60s. You said, right?
correct. Yes.
You're just removing something that wasn't originally there.
Something that was not originally there, right? Correct. Now, I'm not quite sure where they housed the kitchen, to be honest, beforehand. Now, this is back in the 1830s. Did they have, was it around the fireplace? I don't know what they did for a kitchen before the 60s.
I mean, that makes sense because that's where there's a bathroom over there and there's plumbing there too. So that would make sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. And to be honest, too, I'm not quite sure exactly where we're going to terminate. What I've presented to you is sort of the best case where we can terminate. I think structurally, in fact, depending on how the board rules on this, if we can keep part of the house, we'll then bring in a structural engineer to find out exactly where we could divide the house. I don't know if we'll be able to get as much as what I'm presenting to you. I'm just presenting to you the most that I think is going to be possible. I think we're going to have to even cut back even further to where the foundation is. The kitchen and the family room was built on slabs, so that's easy enough. The living room, there is a basement to the living room. It doesn't go all the way to, I think I'm showing it terminate at a fireplace. I don't know if that fireplace is going to be able to be saved or not. I'll wait for a structural engineer to make that determination. So again, this is the most that we would be able to save. It might not be this much. And I don't know what they did, to be honest, in the past for, a kitchen. They might have taken down some of the house to build what they built in the 60s. They might have kept part of what we're going to be tearing down and added on from there. I don't know, to be honest. I don't have that history. I don't know if you know.
And I was,
So let me ask a question. Let me ask a question here. I'm curious about what the variance was back in 2018.
It's simple enough. We basically, the appeal board of appeals allowed us to live in that structure while we built a new house on the same parcel.
Right, and then after that was built, that was to come down, correct?
And that was to come down, correct?
So I don't understand. If it was to come down, why isn't it down yet?
Well, this is the time it's supposed to come down. That's why I'm coming to you. We just moved in about a month ago. So, and we've, basically, that's when we put in the application again to amend to not totally tear it down, but to save just a section of it. And again, that's why we're coming to you tonight.
And the reason it was supposed to come down was because you cannot have two separate dwelling properties on the same property. Is that correct?
That is correct, right. And going forward, we still would not. Because again, we're going to make sure this is not, already it was not, again, as I said, suitable for as a residence even before, because it was not in great shape as a residence. So now we're going to make sure it will not be a residence. So we'll go back to just one dwelling on this property. And that will then be converted basically into an out parcel or an ancillary structure.
It's still not clear to me why this should be granted. If that structure was to come down, it should be coming down.
Right. No, that was right. But
If that was the agreement, then that's what should be done.
Well, except for, again, that's why we're coming to you, because I think maybe we should have originally asked for it to partially remain. Again, because as of right, if it's not a structure, if it's not a dwelling, it's no longer going to be a dwelling. So the main reason we came to you, because we didn't want to have, because there was two dwellings, there would be two dwellings on the same property. There's still not going to be two dwellings, only one dwelling. This will be, again, an outbuilding, which as of right, I believe, as long as we're not over 15%, we're allowed, as of right, an additional structure. So does it make sense to tear it down, then we can rebuild it back? That wouldn't make sense either.
Well, but if indeed it's allowed, then you don't need to come to the zoning board of appeals. It should be within zoning. Well, clearly you're still asking for a variance, so it's not allowed.
No variance. There's no variance. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure. It was suggested by town council that we come before you because of the original application. It was town council's suggestion. It wasn't originally my idea.
Okay, so let me just, can I just clarify for you guys?
Yes.
The original permit that, or variance that was issued in 2018 required that the house come down and required that a bond be posted to ensure that the house come down.
Right.
When the Schaefers asked about retaining part of the house, clearly that wasn't part of the variance that was granted. So town council's opinion was to do anything with the conditions of the variance that was granted, it needed to be remanded back to you for an application to amend that first variance. In cases like this, not the specific case, we do have structures that are house-like in a sense. They are sometimes studios where people do art, or sometimes they're places where people write. And the history has always been that if there's a structure like that on the property, that what happens is an affidavit is recorded on the land records that very specifically states not only for the current owners of the property, but future people who might purchase it, that that structure is never to be used as a residential structure. Our zoning regs did change in 2019 and did allow an accessory apartment. It's limited in size to 600 square feet. It's also limited to being part of the house. So they're even under the regulations as they changed in 2019, this could never be considered a residence. And if this was for some reason to be granted, it would have to be granted subject to the filing of an affidavit stating very specifically on the land records that it would not be used for a dwelling.
It can state it, but that doesn't mean people won't do it. It's easy to put in, a bathroom. You want to have a bathroom in your studio. You want to have a bed in the studio. It seems to me it's very hard to enforce not having it become a dwelling. And an affidavit is lovely, but it's still in violation of what was originally agreed to.
Well, if in hindsight, we would have, the original application would have been to keep partially the structure, again, as an about building. I think, to be honest, as 2 years went by, there was a lot of sentimental, as I said, attachment to the structure, to the family history, the history of Woodbridge. So I think, hindsight, maybe we should have gone originally, which I think would not have changed the outcome, would not have changed the facts that we're still allowed to have this structure as of right.
Can I ask
Originally,
about the application?
okay, originally, there could be no zoning permit issued for the second dwelling that was built with the existing dwelling in place. Historically, Terry, who was our enforcement officer, had required that when someone wanted to build a second dwelling, that the first dwelling had to come down. So there is no historic right, in a sense, to have retained the building, which is why you sought and were given a variance during the construction of your second residence to be able to maintain that first residence. But that was a change from what historically, at least the zoning officer that had been here for 20 some odd years had done.
So Chris, it's Cindy. I have a question again about the affidavit. If they file an affidavit stating the use of the building, correct, as an outbuilding, non-resident, do we have to make sure that they eliminate anything in that building that would allow them to live there? Like obviously the kitchen, the bathroom, even if just it's a structure with, meeting place or storage place. Do we have to say that they have to eliminate the bath, because you have bathrooms in there that they're keeping?
We have outbuildings that have been constructed that are subject to affidavits that have bathrooms. I can't tell you that we have any that have kitchens.
But we're not planning it.
Yeah, there's not going to be a kitchen.
There's no kitchen. The kitchen is coming down.
Right, but it would have to
There
be.
are two
fixed in the
bathrooms
application.
upstairs. When you mean living, we don't intend to have anybody live there. This is our house. I don't know if any of you have seen it, the new house. It's quite nice. Does it make a difference that we've also made the two lots into one so that we will not have another, other building on the, it's now 4 acres instead of 2. It's all one big lot now.
You couldn't divide it into two. You couldn't divide it 2 years ago. You couldn't divide it into 2 building lots.
Actually, it was divided. It's kind of funny. It was originally there was a subdivision that Robin's grandfather put in that created the 2 parcels, and then Robin's parents actually then joined the 2 together because they never planned to develop that second lot. And we actually filed a Mylar plot plan that showed it. We didn't intend it to be subdivided, but it was subdivided by the town when we submitted that.
My father passed.
When he passed.
When
right?
he passed, then the town made it into the 2 lots.
And then we want to join it back again as 1 lot. We never intend, and we don't want to develop that second lot. We want to leave it as open space. Well, technically not open space, but as a for us open space. We don't, this is the final 4, as Robin said. And
I mean, it was 147 acres, just to give you the backstory. And in 1947, by eminent domain, the state came and they split the property up. So my grandfather, Ted, who was the first selectman for 28 years, I don't know if you remember, he immediately, ran for the first selectman, got a couple school buses. It was a working dairy farm. And he ended up selling, I think, to Johnson Road. There was a development and sold that all off and kept some. But again, it wasn't necessarily his choice to stop the dairy farm back then. He didn't have a choice. It became the Wilberforce Parkway. So it's the final 4. And that is why, to me, it's really important to keep part of this old house just as an outbuilding. It's a place to go. It's nobody's going to live there.
You're going to destroy it.
What's that?
2 years ago, you were going to destroy it. Now it's important.
well,
No, I think you. The reason why we also at economics, it was, we.
can I just say,
Okay.
what's important here is that house was not really longer livable as a residence. It cannot be a residence any longer. It just was not an appropriate place to live. So it was almost forced us to. Yeah, we can't. That's right. The insurance company even dropped our insurance because they couldn't insure it. They wouldn't insure it. So we had to really build this house so we had a place to live. Basically, Robin inherited the house, everything, but we couldn't live there. So we had to build this to live. But there's no question, there's a sentimental value to the structure itself. There's a lot of sort of heritage in that structure that we want to keep there as a place that Robin sort of can commune with her family heritage. And that's basically it. It's not livable.
Yeah.
It's not, it's got a lot of issues to live in. It's, so that's why we had no choice but to sort of go to, present facts as they were 2 years ago. We're now asking that we can keep at least part of it again as not structure, I think, as we think we can as of right. So that's where we are. And because of the history of us coming to you 2 years ago, it was suggested we come back to you, do this as an amendment is the best way to do it for the town council.
So let me.
I think it would be helpful to look at this as an evolving situation over the over the course of a few years. So it was going to be torn down because you needed a house to live in. So it was either going to be this one or build a new one. You're going to tear this one down because you decided it wasn't going to be a house that was habitable to live in, right? So
Right.
that was the impetus for tearing it down.
Right.
But So as time goes by, you now have your new construction house, and there's this house which you are saying like, okay, this is not going to be a dwelling anymore. We're going to tear down some of it and retain some of it because it has, whether it's sentimental, some historical, connotations to it, what have you. But I think that's the way it needs to be looked at. It evolved because it wasn't going to be a house torn down, and now it's changing to not being a dwelling, and you want to hold on to it. So that's how I'm kind of seeing it. And also, I mean, with this, does it add some value to the property? Just like, I don't know, like anecdotally. I mean,
I think it adds value actually to the town. I mean, this is an historic structure that's been, part
that's
of the
what I'm
town.
getting at. Yeah, because if it's adding value to you, it's adding value to the town as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think yeah. I mean, the other issue that we have, we're supposed to, again, 2 years are up. Because it's an historic structure, as I believe, if you have to tear it down, I have to go. What, we have to go in front of the historical society or something, and we need like a 100-day stay before we can tear the thing down. I think, is there historical issues too with tearing this house down? I don't know.
Yeah, well, we haven't investigated that, but again, I just want to refer to, I'm surprised that, this is the second edition of we should have Xeroxed the page about the house. And we lived in Overhill Road right down the road. And we had to sell our house so that we can kind of afford this. It was really a nice situation that we could live right here and watch this whole process. And who knew that COVID was going to set in? And it was unbelievable that, we could really be witness to the building of this house. Just, it was nice. Who knew? But economically, it was we were grateful that we were able to live in this house that I inherited. We sold our house, and then we were able to fund this house. So just to give you some backstory, it wasn't like we needed to live here so we could, 2 years it took us to get this going, to get our finances ready, so that we could build this piece of property. I don't know if any of you are you aware, any of you, of this location? Has anybody seen it?
Yes.
I've driven by it many times.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think, all of our neighbors are really happy about it. We thought, well, maybe it's whatever, but they're so happy that we're here doing what we've done. We put a garden, we wanted a garden in the back lot. We really tried hard, and it's just in the middle of Woodbridge, it's just a very lovely site to be living on and also to be around. It's just a nice piece of property for Woodbridge. We should all be proud. We're really lucky that we're able to do this. But for me, being the 5th, 6th generation, it's just really important to me to keep what I can from that old house so that I can just have it and not be the one. Who knows if there's spirits? Who knows? But it's nobody's going to be living there. It's going to be a place. When I retire from my current career, I'm hoping that I could spend some time writing, and it would be nice to have that place to go to where my mother and father spent. My mother grew up there. That's my grandfather and whatever. And so it means something to me, that living room, it's called. It's beautiful Greek revival structure.
So I would like to ask you a question, and this is more aimed at the zoning law side of things. Forgetting the history of what's gone on to how we've gotten to where we are right now. If this were being built from scratch with the house as it's being built and the proposed building as an out property, would there have to be a variance?
The existing house, the old house, is non-conforming. The newly constructed house is totally conforming.
Right, but if there was an outbuilding, I think what.
If there was an outbuilding, the outbuilding could not be constructed where the current house is, the old house is. No.
Because of the setback, right?
Because of the front yard setback.
Yeah, it's an historic structure, so yeah.
It's a non-conforming structure that's allowed to remain as a non-conforming structure, except that the variance that was granted required that it be taken down when the second structure was completed.
Right. And I always thought that one of the goals of zoning is to reduce non-compliance.
That is correct.
And what was agreed to 2 years ago reduced non-compliance. The historic value of the house was the same 2 years ago, and reducing non-compliance made sense, and that's why it was granted. And this could not exist as an outbuilding. So if you need an outbuilding, that can't be it.
Right, but it's an existing non-conforming
It's
building,
existing,
and we're
right.
not changing the non-conformity. We're changing the
The
use of the building.
reason that
We're
was
changing-
granted 2 years ago to not tear it down was so they could have some convenience and live there while the other house was being constructed, with the understanding that the non-conforming structure would be removed with the completion of the new house. So this is not the same as,
Just one point, this has changed.
what's changed.
Our hope to keep what we can from the old house.
No, I understand that, but we're looking at in terms of zoning code and the zoning laws. The reason it was granted 2 years ago was precisely so that you could build a new house and that this non-conforming structure would be removed. Anyway, that's
It is grandfathered in. It is grandfathered in as, so we're again, you'll take that into consideration.
what's grandfathered in.
Well, the fact that it's an existing structure, that's all. You know,
No.
and it's been there before. It was there before the zoning regs.
Yes, but it's not. It isn't that is not the structure. The structure is your new house. So it wasn't grandfathered in. If you were remodeling that old house, that would be a different story. That's not what happened. What happened is you built a brand new house, which is completely conforming. Again, everyone has a different opinion. I'm just looking at it from what the goal of zoning is.
Right. Chris, can you explain the affidavit a little bit more for me? So this is filed with the town records, correct?
It's filed by the owners of the property on the town land records. It's to signify that as owners, they recognize that it would not be used as a dwelling, and it is something to alert future owners that it is not something that could be used as a dwelling.
And is it enforceable by the zoning enforcement officer if somebody starts using it as?
We would go
dwelling?
through the violation process of sending the letters stating that, it's not an allowed use, and then we go from there. Yes. But in terms of what Henry was saying, he's absolutely correct in saying that when the variance was granted 2 years ago, that the goal of zoning was the removal of a non-conforming structure. In the end, that historic non-conforming structure would be removed and replaced by a new conforming structure. And that was part of the reason that was given at that point by the commission for granting that variance to allow the house to remain temporarily while the second conforming house was constructed.
Further along on this topic of the affidavit, so earlier, Hank, you said that's not. I don't want to quote you, but it sounded like you said it wasn't enforceable. So is that really the case that these affidavits really aren't do they not have any value or enforceability, or what's the purpose of their existence?
It's, as I stated, it's to give a legal document signed by the property owners indicating that they accept that that will not be used as a dwelling, and that's something that's carried forward to any future owners of the property. Under our current zoning and even under the old zoning, it could not be a second structure. I mean, a second residence.
Do we know of, do you have any experience of these, any other affidavits on properties that have been in violation?
I don't know of anybody that's been violating the affidavits that have been filed, no.
But people do sort of fudge it. For instance, if a house can have 3 bedrooms, a 4th bedroom is going to be put in, but it won't have a closet, so it doesn't count as a bedroom.
We don't count bedrooms. Okay. The only reason that bedrooms are counted is for purposes of septic systems, and
Yes,
that's
yes.
enforced by the
Right.
Quinnipiac Valley Health District, and they review house plans, which they do anytime there's an addition.
Right.
It is their determination whether or not the addition, even if someone says it's not going to be a bedroom, whether or not indeed it could be a bedroom. And that's totally up to them.
No, right. Oh, I'm not. Yes, I'm just saying that it's not hardcore. It can be fudged a little bit. Anyway, be that as it may, it sounds like we've gone around this circle a bunch of times. I don't even know who's sitting on this, by the way.
Well, let's see. We didn't state at the very beginning. You joined us. And so let's see, who do we have as alternates? We have 2 alternates present. And we have, hold on a second. I think we're missing 1 full member. No, we're missing an alternate. Frank's not here. And hold on. Bear with me.
Yep.
So we are missing Jeff. So we need a full member position with an alternate going in. So someone needs to select someone to be that alternate to fill in.
Okay. So let's see. We have
You have Celia, and
Celia, Joy, Sean, me,
Alden, and Cynthia. So
and isn't all? I thought I heard Alden,
Alden is here. Yes,
and I forgot I thought he was a.
he's a full member.
All right. So do we have?
You're missing Jeff Atwood. As a full
No,
member.
Jeff just chatted. He said he's here.
Oh, he just got here. Okay, he wasn't there before.
Okay. Well, he was hiding.
Well, I didn't see him. Jeff, how long have you been here?
He's been listening. He knows what's going on.
Because I don't see him. Okay.
All right. So we have.
So you've got 5 full members here.
Okay. So then we'll have the 5 full members. Okay. So do we want to have a motion?
Well, you have to close your hearing.
Okay. Do anyone have any other comments?
Do I have a chance to like a final comment?
What's that? Is that the red phone?
Is that? Sorry.
Was that the red phone? Don't do it.
Yeah. So I just hit that. No, I appreciate your consideration. I think it's definitely for positive for the full town. Again, it really retains the fabric of the town. And again, I appreciate your consideration, considering that it helps us. Again, as I said, block also a commercial structure across the street, and so it's been tough. And so I appreciate your consideration, and again, also for the historic nature and the family heritage. I appreciate your consideration.
Okay. Any other comments from anyone? Okay, so why don't we close the hearing part? Oh, there's Alden. Hi, Alden.
But I've now gotten to a place where I can be on video.
Yes. Wow. All right, so we have the full crew. Would anybody like to make a motion? Nothing.
I make a motion to accept the variance with an affidavit of description of use by the owners.
Okay. Okay.
I will second that.
I suppose in this case, we don't need a hardship. Well, actually, we still need a hardship.
Do we need a hardship? Because there isn't a variance being applied. We're doing a modification of a previous approval.
No, because the previous approval had the structure destroyed, so it's not really a modification. I mean, it's not. If in a way, this structure doesn't exist.
Does exist. Does exist.
Does the
Couple hundred
does
years.
the changing of the purpose of the structure modify that need?
Yeah, but that structure is non-compliant.
Right.
All right. Anyway, so I'm not sure what we need to do with regard to that. All right. So I guess we can vote. Anything good you're eating?
Can I just say who seconded?
I did.
Alden did? Okay.
Good. All right. So all in favor of granting the, I guess, the variance with the, as Cindy said, with the affidavit, can say aye.
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 Sean and Cindy. All right. All opposed? I'm opposed.
What did Jeff vote? I couldn't hear him.
Jeff said aye. So we have 4 ayes. So, I'm sorry, he's opposed. So we have 3 votes for and 2 votes against. So it does not go forward. We need 4 votes out of 5 for this to go forward.
Correct. That is correct.
So we have 3. So this was not a successful appeal. Okay. All right, so let's move on to the next.
You're on mute.
Tony, you're saying something, you're muted.
I unmuted him.
Okay, no, it's just the only thing is we also requested 6 months additional time.
Yeah.
Part of that, especially since if it's an historic structure, do we need to file with?
The time is up, so you can file. Certainly, there's still avenues for you to
So
sue.
we will pursue avenues for sure.
Yeah, and that's fine, and as well you should. You have the historic nature you can pursue, and I think you can also still bring it to the court and see if they can reverse this. So this is not necessarily the end, but this is the vote of this commission today.
Oh, to say we're disappointed. Yeah, so we will pursue whatever avenues we can.
Absolutely.
A small town like Woodbridge, we have a lot of history here, and the house has a lot of history. So I'm very disappointed. I think that it's not a big ask. There's a lot involved here. So we will continue to pursue this.
No, and you should. You should pursue it until it's resolved.
I wish we had presented the case, and that I'm surprised that all of you really don't have a copy of this historic Woodbridge book, because there's a lot of houses in there.
Woodbridge book existed 2 years ago, didn't it?
Yeah, and it still exists.
So,
most houses are here, so it's something definitely to pick up, because it's
all right.
important.
So let's move on to the next one.
Okay, We're
Take care. Good luck.
Okay, so the next appeal. Oh, there you are. Okay. So,
Somebody typing?
okay, so we'll have the same people seated for this one. So it is now what, 8:20, and we'll hear the next appeal from Bernie Pellegrino for Wine and Spirits of Woodbridge LLC.
Good evening. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Bernard Pellegrino. I'm an attorney with the Pellegrino Law Firm located in New Haven. I represent the applicant, Woodbridge Wine and Spirits, in regard to this request for variance. The property is 245 Amity Road, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. It's a multi-tenant commercial development. It's on the right side of Amity Road as you start up the hill. It has multiple tenants. The restaurant Saloon is in that plaza. I'll give you a floor plan of the buildings located on the site. The property is located in your DEV1 zone, which permits retail package stores by special permit. So if we are successful in obtaining the variance tonight, we would go to Planning and Zoning Commission for a special permit and site plan application as well. The variance, while the regs permit package stores in this DEV1 zone, which is probably one of the largest commercial zones located in the town. Parenthetically, package stores and other liquor establishments are also permitted in the B1 and GB zones, all in the southern end of town where your commercial zones are kind of accumulate. While it's permitted as a permitted use in this zone by special permit, section 3.3 H parenthetical 3 requires a 500-foot separation distance from the property, and any properties that include residential uses, privates or public schools, museums, camps, athletics leagues, churches, or other religious facilities, and a library or community teen center. So those are all of the uses that require a 500-foot separation distance from a retail package store. Interestingly, at least based on my investigation, there's no sites in the town that would permit a retail package store, despite the fact that they are permitted uses in 3 of your zones, your commercial zones, because all of the sites, or at least based on my review, would be disqualified by the 500-foot separation distance based on the uses that I just read to you from the regulation. We are 260 feet from a residential dwelling. There's 2 right next to each other on Bradley Road. And those residences, if you look at your zoning map, are little outcroppings within the larger DEV1 zone. So it makes little sense that the regulations would permit this use in zones, but then totally disqualify every or almost every site, at least as far as I could tell, by the separation distance requirement. So I think that in and of itself is an unusual hardship relative to this site and some other potentially qualifying site. In addition to that fact, there are other circumstances and hardships which I mentioned in my application that I think are relevant. This site, which is one of your larger commercial sites, is fairly self-contained, squarely within the central part of one of your largest commercial zoning districts, and it already has a restaurant that has a permit to serve alcohol for consumption on site. As I already mentioned, I think the DEV1 zone is your largest zone, and our site is located in the central portion of that zone, yet that little outcropping of the non-conforming, although zoned, I forgot the zoning designation, but the, I think it was the T3 double B zone, kind of knocks us out of the block. And the other circumstance is that your regulation requires the distance measured from property line to property line. On the subject site, the property line to the east extends a considerable way down Bradley Road because there's a lot of parking over there. When you do if you did front door to front door, we are almost 500 feet from that neighboring site. So, so for all of these reasons, our client and the property owner who would like to fill this vacant storefront in the his plaza would respectfully request you look favorably upon this application. Happy to answer any questions if there are any. I think I saw that. I just want to, there was a question from Mr. Atwood. Are you planning to put the liquor store in the current set of small retail units? I believe the answer is yes. The specific location for the store, and I may have given you the floor plan layout, but it's in the far end of the long far end of the building. I think it's the third slot from the second slot from the far eastern portion of the building. It's about a 1,500 square foot space. I hope that answers your question, Jeff.
Is it unit 109?
Yes, it is. It's
Okay.
vacant currently.
Okay, so yeah, it's the third one in from the end.
Yes. I have not spoken to them. I do believe they received notice of this meeting and the application, however. I don't know if Chris or anyone at...
Actually, they did not receive specific notice because we send it to the abutting property owners, and Woodbridge Village Estates owns the property between them and 245 Amity Road.
Gotcha.
We should also note that this is those two houses are the closest houses, but measuring from property line to property line, that the back portions of the houses along Landon also fall within the 500 feet, but are not obviously on the same road at all. They're, a different road. Only the two houses that are on Bradley actually front on Bradley where the business would be.
Oh, so you're saying like the corner of the retail property technically is within the backyards of those two houses on Landon?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
It doesn't directly abut them, but on the other side of the assisted living complex,
Right.
Landon sits, and it's probably about almost 400 feet. So it's further away, but on the backyards of those.
Chris, do you have any history to share about this 500-foot requirement under the section 3.3 subsection 3?
They took it from, this started when there was a vote within town, which actually required that the town allow liquor establishments to be in town. And when they did this, they looked at regulations from other towns, and then they just literally lifted the language from, I don't remember which town it was, but they did lift it from another town. At that point, David King was a member of the Town Planning and Zoning Commission, and he did note, as Attorney Pellegrino mentioned, that there may be cases where there is no place in town literally where this could happen, but that the uses are not necessarily permanent uses, the residential uses or a church or whatever, they come, they go. So when the Town Planning and Zoning was adopting this, they were cognizant of the fact that uses could come and go, and that there might be times when there would be no openings in town for such a business, but there would be other times where there might be an opening. So there was a discussion of this at that time.
So if one was permitted because it met the 500 feet, and then somebody moves into a house and now it changes, would the package store have to close?
No, because the package store use would have been granted
Right.
prior to the it becoming non-conforming in a sense.
And for Mr. Pellegrino, you said there were some places within the town that are not within are not outside the 500 feet, which in fact there is alcohol sold that exists right now. Is that correct?
Yeah, there are. I should say that the package store 500-foot restriction, as far as I can tell, there are none. The only one that I think may be, and I couldn't quite tell because it was a little hard to read, is the current Wells Fargo site on the other side of the street. That site, which is a single tenant site, might be a qualifying site, but every other site that I looked at, and I think we exhausted all options in looking at different sites, either because of those two streets, Lucy and Landon, the school that's down over near Cat's Deli, and
Children's House Montessori.
What's that?
It's a Montessori school, yeah.
Yep. And there was a couple of churches, or at least one, I think, that was a disqualifier. I couldn't find any sites that would qualify for a liquor store. Now, the rule for restaurants with liquor permits is different. So that's why you have saloon on the same site with the on-site consumption permit, but which is permitted on that site. But I need the variance for the package store for purchase and off-site, usage, if you will.
Can you cite any other towns that have this 500-foot rule or a 250-foot rule or a 43-foot rule?
Well,
Package
it's
store
interesting.
where there are no problems.
Um,
This seems to be an arbitrary number. And if indeed it's arbitrary, is there any data to support that number? Or should it be 2,000 feet or should it be 32 feet?
Well, it's interesting question, and I have run into a similar regs in other towns. I lived for many years in North Haven. North Haven has a similar reg, but I think it's an arbitrary number, and I think a number of other towns like East Haven, Northford, and another one might have been Guilford, have eliminated it. Its vestige kind of goes back to the days of the blue laws. And for a time period, the State Liquor Control Commission had certain regulations relative to distance from schools and I believe churches. Your inclusion of residential structures, I would tell you, is unique based on my experience with these regulations in other towns. I may be speaking out of school, but I kind of like to have a liquor store close by so that it's convenient. And you have none in your whole town. So maybe that's why I've lived most of my life in North Haven as opposed to Woodbridge. But I think a relatively modest liquor store in your community on that site would be a benefit to the town, would be a convenient location to buy a bottle of wine. And it's kind of in keeping with the uses on this site. And I don't think those residents would have much objection to a small liquor store there. Again, keeping in mind that this regulation, which not a fan of, not picking on Woodbridge, but just in general, is kind of, I won't say ancient, but a vestige of the old blue laws opinion relative to the sale of alcohol, which I think is a bygone sentiment, let's say. So I don't think
Chris, can I
that
ask
this
a
request
question?
would have any negative impact on the community. I don't think it would change the nature of the neighborhood. And I think in light of all of the issues that I mentioned earlier, that under these circumstances, this variance request is one that I hope you would look favorably upon.
So, Chris, can I ask you a question about the regulation? So obviously the restaurant is under special permit, but they're allowed, correct?
Correct.
The brewery is under special permit, but they're allowed, correct?
Under the regulations, breweries and restaurants are excluded from the 50-foot distance. Yes,
500,
500 foot, sorry.
500. So given that nature, why would we grant an exception for this? Why wouldn't we ask them to change our regulations to mirror what we have with the brewery, the restaurants? Otherwise, we'll be granting exceptions just say all the time. You know, I don't understand why they put that in here for liquor stores as opposed to restaurants and breweries. Does that make sense to everyone? I mean, why are we bringing it to here? Wouldn't it go back to them?
No, because it's the zoning board of appeals. I mean, zoning has what they have. And so we would have to grant the variance to do it. If everyone
Well,
who
we don't-
wanted variance had to go back to zoning and have zoning change it, nothing would ever happen.
Except
No, it
the
would be a
issue
one-time
is,
change.
yeah, the question is, are we granting a variance for, and going back to our purpose, a specific hardship, or are we being asked to grant a variance because we disagree with the rule? If it's the former, then yes, I think there's a very good reason for us to consider a variance. But if it's because we don't think this is a good rule, then I'm completely in agreement that it should go to planning and zoning instead of to us.
Yeah, I don't see the difference in the rule between a brewery and a restaurant and a liquor store. I don't personally. I could be.
And to Jeff's point, the brewery sells beer over the counter, which is an off-premise sale, and package stores are off-premise sales. So there's a similarity there.
I don't see where his comments are. I don't. Where's he talk? Where I don't see
You
that.
have to expand the window. There's a chat window you can expand.
Oh.
So I guess this leaves me with what I see as a fundamental question of, is there a land hardship that is a reason to grant a variance? And if not, I don't see how we can grant a variance. If there is, I'd like to hear what the hardship is.
Well, I think the, based on, I think you can argue that the distance requirement for this particular site, given its length, the property line, given the length, kind of the narrow and shape of the site, and the fact that the parking extends to the east beyond the building somewhat significantly, given the width of the site, make the the easternmost property line in both instances non-compliant with the separation distance. But when you're going building to those residences, and even more so to the ones on Landon Street, you are essentially at the 500 feet. So I think the shape of the property and the fact that because it's narrow and long, the location of the parking to the eastern edge of the sites makes that, a property line to property line distance a hardship for this site. How's that?
Personally, I'm not buying it because all of our zoning laws are based on property line.
And with this 500-foot requirement, everybody would have a hardship.
Well, perhaps not, because if the building within the property line was kind of similar to most, where the building is centrally located, whereas in this case, the building, the parking area extends to the east a lot more because of the narrowness of the site. So they had to put the parking down there. That makes this separation distance shorter, given the configuration of the property.
The question though, when we talk about property line, you said the address for this place is 109, is that correct?
No, the unit number within the building is 109.
Okay, so the unit number. So if you looked at the unit property line, not the entire parcel, but rather the unit itself,
Yeah,
what's the distance to the unit, not to the overall? If the piece of property is owned by one organization, then that puts a hardship in terms of something that's within it, which is a package store. So what's the distance from the house to the store?
from the house front door to the store front door,
Right.
it was like 489 feet.
So it would still require a variance.
It would.
All right, I guess we've beaten this one up pretty well. Any further discussion? Okay, so let's close this, and anyone have a motion? Okay, so Jeff just put a motion to vote on the variance. I presume that means positively to grant it? Yes, okay. So I'll second it. All right, all in favor? All right, I'm in favor. I presume Jeff is. Sean is. And that's, it looks like we have the same 3-2. Right? So all the nays? So Cindy, and who else is?
Alden, nay.
Okay. So this was not successful. We need 4 out of 5 to make it successful. So I'm not sure where you go from here, but I presume you can go to the court. I'm not really sure what the next step is.
I will say is in my comments initially is that I would absolutely support a liquor store in that location. And I believe that it should be changed in zoning and not as an appeal. So I would strongly support you and encourage you to bring it as a proposal to change zoning.
Thank you.
Good idea.
Great.
That would be one option that we could petition to change the reg, and if we do, maybe this board might support that application. So thank you for your time. I appreciate your consideration and your very good questions.
Mr. Pellegrino, when you go before zoning, you might ask it to be from door to door and not to the property line, because the property line is really kind of misleading because there are other structures within that property.
And you might want to consider lowering the distance to
Yes,
200
yes,
feet.
absolutely.
And as Sean said, it's a good point that if you could buy beer at the brewery to take home and consume off-site, maybe restaurants, breweries, and package stores should all be exempt.
Yep.
I think so.
Or the other
I would
option
think
is you
that.
take residences out of the distance restriction and you leave, which is typical in other towns, you know, churches, schools, and maybe the library or the public park. Because in your town, the residential restriction is really the killer. And as I said, in my opinion, well, I don't think probably any of these are worthwhile. That one seems to be most obsolete, if you will, and certainly injurious to the introduction of a new commercial use within the town.
Right. Right.
Okay.
I think it would be better well served.
maybe we'll consider that. I know that our client would really like to come to your town, and I think the site's ideal for him. So Chris and I may be discussing a second option to skin this cat a different way. Again, I appreciate all your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So I guess the last order of business is to look at the minutes. I don't know if anyone's done that.
I reviewed the minutes and I make a motion to approve them.
Okay, I will second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, a unanimous vote. Okay, we did it.
Finally.
All right, let's try for one more unanimous vote. Oh, even Jeff. One more unanimous vote will be to adjourn the meeting. It is 8:50. Oh, I guess the clock on my computer says 8:48. Sorry. All right, so motion to adjourn the meeting.
I will make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Oh, Jeff seconded. Right. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we ended with a blast. That's fantastic. See you guys. See you next month.
Thank you all, guys. Have a good night.
Take care.
Good night.